Looks like a lot of you. I'm guessing a lot of you, if not all of you, are new to the conference. Put your hands up if you've ever been to a CFI Conference before. Okay, so put your hands up if you haven't been to a CFI Conference before. Alright, hi, welcome everyone. It's so good to see you all here. To start with, next slide, just to give you like a bit of an agenda for this talk. The first one will be the mission, like why are we here, what we're going to do, what is the point of this conference. Part two will be practical tips to help you make the most of this conference. And the last part will be speed friendly, so actually just turning to people next to you and just talking and getting to know each other. Next slide. So to start with, I'd love to introduce myself a little bit and just kind of show you guys how I got here in the first place, and hopefully with that you can see that if you are in a bad place in your career right now, I was there as well. So in 2017 is actually when I met Christ. That's when I gave my life to him and I realized I can't keep living the life I was living, I need to change my life around. And so that's when I met Jesus. And shortly after that, while at university, I was studying psychology at the University of Southampton. And Just Love, it's a Christian community organization, yes. The whole purpose of it is to help Christian students pursue the biblical justice, the call to social justice as seen in the Bible. And because I had just become a Christian, for me, I realized, I don't know how, but I just knew I need to spend my life doing something impactful, helping other people. I just suddenly became aware of all the suffering in the world, and I knew I needed to do something about this. And so I joined Just Love, and I guess that's where my journey to impact sort of started. But it wasn't that smooth, because once I finished uni, I went back to London, where I did my master's in behavior change, and shortly after that, before I graduated, I got kind of recruited to work at a company called Conversion. And at this point, essentially, Christian Spring did not exist. I had no idea what I wanted to do, and I basically just ended up going for the first job that got offered to me. And in the first week, I was already okay, this is not what I want to do. We were working on some betting company, and I was this is so against my values as a Christian. I can't do this. But I stuck it through. I was there for about a year and a half. After which I had a couple more jobs. I'm not even going to put them there. But then I joined this other company called Spotless. Again, stayed there for around a year and a half. Both of these are essentially market research, digital marketing, improving websites. I gained a lot of skills in these two jobs, and looking back now, the benefits of hindsight, they actually helped me a lot in doing what I'm doing now. So God definitely used everything for good. But when I was at Spotless, I was getting to the point where again, I wanted to change. I was looking at applying for charities. I just wanted to do something, putting my faith into practice on a daily basis, because we spend so much time at work, so I wanted to do something more meaningful. And that's when Christians for Impact kind of came up in my horizon. JD had posted on Effective Altruism for Christian Facebook chat that he was launching Christians for Impact. And he had made a website, and he wanted some feedback. And because my whole job was basically giving feedback to companies about their websites and services to help them improve them, I was okay, I would love to volunteer and help you make this website as good as it can be. And so I reached out. I did that. We did a volunteer project, completely free. But after a few months, I was getting to the point where I was I really feel I need to do something different. He reached out, he was looking for a marketing person, and I had no experience in marketing at all. As in, social media, newsletters, stuff like that. I just didn't do any of that. But I did an interview, did a work task, and I got the job. And I was doing that for 5 hours while still doing my full-time job. But then I started praying to God. I was okay, God, I just want to surrender my entire career to you. I'm not going to try and force anything to happen anymore. I'm just going to let you do what you want. And essentially, I just knew that it was time to quit. Like I had no plan. Like I was only working 5 hours for Christians for Impact. I was like, I don't know if this is gonna like work. But I quit, and literally 2 days later, JB reached out and said, oh, we can offer you a lot more hours and more pay as well, which meant that I could actually, do this more full time and I quit my job, so I didn't have to rely on anything else. So God came through, and this is basically how I'm here now. I'm the marketing lead for Christians for Impact, and if you are on Instagram or TikTok or LinkedIn, I basically do all of those posts. So yeah, this is what happened, and at the end of it, like everything that happened, even when I was so confused about my career and unsatisfied with what I was doing, God was making everything happen and like working everything out for my good. And so that's where I was. Next slide, please. So just to give you a bit of a background of like what CFI is all about. So what is the mission? Imagine there is a problem that God wants you to tackle with your career that you've never thought about. This is essentially what this conference is about, and you will see throughout the whole 2 days. And if you are here, you are probably here because you agree with the statement. You know as a Christian why you should live a life of stewardship. I mean, we know that as Jesus followers, we are supposed to love our neighbor. Like Jesus literally said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as ourselves. I don't need to convince you that the right thing to do is to love our neighbor. But the more difficult part is, how do we actually go about doing that? What is the practical way to do that in the best way that we can? Kind of like I was so confused about what I could be doing with my life when I was younger. And you might have questions like, who do I serve first? How do you serve in the best way? What job should you get? What problem should you focus on? How much to give? Where do you volunteer? How to lead systemic change? How to manage your finances? And even where do you even give? Because our money, of course, is an important resource, and we want to make sure that it goes to the most important causes that are going to use it, to the best extent. But before we get into all of that, all of those practical nitty-gritty parts, we have to understand what actually is impact. And to do that, first we have to understand what impact is not. Firstly, impact is not merely strength, wealth, or influence. When we talk about impact, we don't mean these things just for their own sake. A person who possesses tens of millions of dollars, and we know many of those people, but never uses it for any good, is basically someone who just buries their talents in the ground. They're exceedingly wealthy, but they're not impactful at all. So it's not about wealth. Instead, things like wealth and influence and career capital, experience, they can be tools for impact. They're not supposed to be just pursued for their own sake. They are tools to help us have a better impact. Secondly, impact is not about output or what you produce. I mean, you can have a job where you do a lot, where you are working 24/7 and you produce a lot, but maybe that is actually not the most impactful things that you could be producing. So it's not about what you do and produce. Impact is rather about how much the world is different because of it. Thirdly, impact is not certain. Once you start thinking about true counterfactual impact, which you might hear during the conference, things get messy really fast. Like, the impact is not that easy to measure, but we know that we can measure it with some confidence. And also, we are Christians. We believe in a God who is sovereign over everything, and so we don't always see when or how God might intervene in some of these problems. But even as we can't be perfectly sure what the most impactful path is, we can still aim for it. Our job is to trust in God and try our best, relying on Him and His grace. And this conference is more about the formal part, trying our best with what we have and with what God has given us. And most importantly, impact is not the only thing that matters. It goes without saying that we discourage any paths of impact that require lying, neglecting key relationships, neglecting your faith, or breaking any of those commandments. Other things such as your virtue, your character, your intentions, your family, your spouse if you have one, your parents, your children, God's commandments and His glory, and your spiritual, mental, and physical health, all of these are super important and they shouldn't be neglected for the pursuit of impact. So what actually is impact? We believe that impact is about good outcomes. The impact of any choice, including your career choice, is the change that choice makes to the world. Positive changes are those that conform to God's standard of goodness and His plan to renew all things. We believe that Scripture shows God's impact vision. The Bible has a lot to say about the kind of world that God longs to see. So we consider a range of outcomes that Scripture affirms are good, such as justice for the poor, faith in God, peace on earth, and the flourishing of God's creation. And we believe that if you look through the Bible, you will find many, many verses that point towards these. And these are the kinds of visions and good outcomes that we'll be focusing on throughout this conference. And impact is about well-being. All of the things that I just mentioned have a common thread. God's concern for the well-being of both people and animals. We do focus more on people, but there are good scriptural reasons to believe that God cares about the well-being of animals as well. Well-being is about what's ultimately good for someone. And to get the best possible picture of this, we turn to scripture, reason, and evidence, as you will see throughout the talks today. And lastly, the more impact, the better. An action is more impactful if it helps more people or helps the same amount of people more. This graph is a good visual representation of this. You could say that impact is the number of people helped times the amount you help them. And we do think that impact can be measured. And what we want to do and what we are trying to do through this conference and through everything that we do is choosing the actions that help the most. And to kind of give a summary of what I just said, the way that we define impact is good outcomes that conform with God's redemptive plan to renew our fallen world. And we can be partners with Him in this. When we're thinking about how this can practically fit into our careers, which I'm guessing a lot of you are here because of that, we can use this practical career model. At the bottom there, you'll see virtues. We've put that at the bottom because we believe that virtues, namely having a Christ-like character, is the foundation of all impact. It's about our character and virtues becoming more like Jesus, which will allow us to ultimately have more impact in our lives, because Jesus was the most impactful person that ever lived and will ever live. And when we try to figure out our careers, we believe that this is a good model to use. The next thing is figuring out what problem or cause area we should try to solve. Because not all cause areas are created equal. This is something that you will find throughout this conference. The next thing is, once you've got your cause area, is choosing what are the best ways to solve these problems, the best interventions for that. And then we can know which roles we need to pursue, what jobs to do, what companies to work for, what organizations to support, and the skills and experience required to get there. I'm not going to go through all of this, but JD has a 5-year plan career workshop later today that if you are confused about your career and you want to put this into practice, definitely recommend you going to that. He's going to go through all of these points in a lot more depth than I just did. I just gave you an introduction. But the question that I want to focus on is, which problem should we spend our limited resources, time, and money trying to solve? This silly graphic, I don't know if you can read it, it says, by the 5th year, Jim really regretted following his childhood passion for ice cream. It's supposed to show that our passions may not be the best indicators of what we should spend our careers working on, especially if our priority is having an impact. And I do want to note here, maybe your passion is something that God has specifically called you to do. And if you are in that position, then you are privileged. I would love if God just suddenly told me one day, you need to do exactly this and go here and do it like this. But the reality is that for a lot of us, God doesn't speak in such a direct way. Instead, He gives us tools, He gives us wisdom, He gives us people, spiritual mentors, and science, evidence, books, to figure out what are those best paths. And that's what we try to do and help you figure out. We should be strategic about how to use our limited gifts and resources to make the greatest possible difference on the problem God cares about. And one way we can do this is through the ITN Framework, specifically to find a problem that is worth tackling with our career. The ITN Framework stands for importance, the severity and the scale of a problem. The most important causes are ones that are very severe, or a very large scale, or a combination of the two. I'm sure you can think of a lot of problems that are both extremely severe and extremely large in their scale. The next thing is tractability. This basically asks, what can we actually do about this problem? There are some issues that are incredibly important, and they affect a lot of people, or animals, or the world as a whole, but we just can't do anything to move the needle with them. Instead, we should focus on issues that we can actually move the needle. And at the N stands for neglectedness. This is about, does this problem already have a lot of attention, people, and resources towards it? Because if it does, then your contribution is not going to be the way that you can have the most impact that you can. From a Christian perspective, we might have special concern for those who are marginalized and neglected. This verse from Proverbs 31, speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly, defend the rights of the poor and needy. We know that Jesus spoke a lot about the marginalized and He helped them. He came here for the poor. He says, I came to preach good news to the poor. Concern for the oppressed and marginalized will sometimes look like concern for neglected cause areas that not a lot of people care about. And at CFI, we've spent years researching and praying about what these problems are that have a high combination of all three factors: importance, tractability, and neglectedness. And this is what we converged on. We're not saying by any means that these are the only problems that matter. We know that sadly society has a lot more problems than these, but we are confident that these are worthwhile to tackle with your career, specifically because of their importance, neglectedness, and tractability. And I highly encourage you to go to as many of these cause areas talks throughout these 2 days, especially ones that you haven't considered before. Remember the challenge that I gave at the beginning of the talk. And just like not all causes are created equal, not all charities are equally good in their impact or effectiveness. As you can see here from Giving What We Can, which is a charity evaluator, some charities are 10 or even 100 times more effective than others. And carefully evaluating which charities to work for, volunteer at, or donate to can massively affect the amount of impact that we can have. And think about when you are making any sort of financial decision or when you are buying something, you're always looking for the best buck for your money, essentially. Like you want to get the best possible laptop or car for the money that you want to spend on it. This is how we should be thinking about choosing the charities that we donate to and work for. Which charities are going to give the best buck for our money? Which charities are going to help the most people in the most impactful way possible? Give Directly and ICM are going to be here. They're two highly impactful charities working to help the extremely poor in our world. I highly recommend you going to those two talks to learn more about what an effective charity really looks like and what they do. And this careful evaluation of which causes and charities to invest in forms the basis of what we call effective altruism. At the core of it, EA, effective altruism, is an idea. An idea about using reason and evidence to find the best ways to do good, especially through effective and generous giving, but also through pursuing impactful careers. So these are the two things that we'd love to focus on. But it's also a movement, as JD said. We obviously have a lot of conferences, events, and we do retreats as well throughout the year. And as a CFI community, we organize the Christians in this movement through what we call effective altruism for Christians. But ultimately, we are, as Christians, we are Christians first and foremost, and then we are effective altruists. And that is always important to keep in mind. We know that our identity is in Christ, not in any good that we may do, and that the good of the world doesn't ultimately rest on our shoulders. God is in control. But we do believe that EA offers many good tools that can help us better put our love into practice, and we should use them. After all, Jesus did say to us, we should be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. And being wise does involve using reason and evidence to find the best ways to do good. If you have questions about effective altruism, even if you have disagreements, and we have ours as well, go to Leora's talk, which is right after this one, where she'll talk about whether EA is too utilitarian for Christianity. And also, you can go to Grader's talk, Living Out Christ-like Generosity by Earning to Give, which is about a separate aspect of effective altruism, which is all about earning as much as you can to give away as much as you can to the most effective charities. So if you want to learn more, definitely go to those two talks. So, by now, hopefully, you might have a better idea of how to start thinking about these questions that I shared at the beginning of the talk. And my hope is that during this conference, you can start to answer as many of these with a lot more clarity and focus. And the way that you can do that is by talking to people, booking one-to-ones with people, and actually asking them these questions. And to go to the next part of this talk, I want to offer you 3 or maybe 4 practical tips of how to make the most of this conference. Tip number 1 is set aspirational and more down-to-earth goals. So one example of an aspirational goal is deciding on the next career step. I mean, if one of you or many of you, figured out what you want to do after this conference, that's amazing, and we would love if you did that. But you don't have to. This is not going to be that easy. But you can set a more realistic goal, such as connecting to people from 3 causes that you're interested in. The next one is figuring out who you need to talk to and why you need to ask them. And you can do that, of course, on Spotcard. You've probably seen all of this and hopefully you've used it. If you didn't know, you can filter the attendee list by what stage of their career they're at, what kinds of issues they are interested in, and probably some of the people here will be tackling those issues already, how they can help you, and also where they live. So you can use that to book one-to-one meetings and actually talk to people who, will be helpful for you personally. But the next step is to see who you can help. Maybe you have some skills, some experience that is extremely useful for 1 or 2 people in this room. And this conference isn't just about what we can get, but also what we can give to others. And so try and be helpful to others, because I am 100% sure that some of your experience will be exactly what someone else needs. The next tip is to use your time thoughtfully. Maybe you need to be prioritizing one-to-ones. Maybe you need advice and connections from people. Or maybe you want to go to as many talks as possible to get as much information as possible. And I recommend going to at least 1 or 2 talks that you wouldn't normally attend. Maybe cause areas that either you disagree with or that you've just never thought about before. this is literally the best way that you can actually be pleasantly surprised by this conference and what you can learn from here. And I highly recommend you to join a dinner group this evening. We're going to give you some information about that later on. But we're going to have dinner groups today where you can meet other people and socialize with other people. And tomorrow we have an after-event meetup, literally 5 minutes away from this venue, where we're going to eat some pizza, maybe do some karaoke, we're not sure yet, we'll see. And then just socialize with people and make friends. That is, ultimately, we'd love for you to be able to form some friendships from this conference. So, with that, I'd love for you now to start doing some of these things right now. So take 5 minutes, I'm going to give you 5 minutes, and feel free to, talk to people around you. But I'd love if you could take your phones out, or maybe your notepads, and set at least 2 aspirational goals and 2 down-to-earth goals that you want to get out of this conference. I'm going to give you 5 minutes.